everyone. Welcome to another community showcase. I think, it's really exciting, this one, because we are actually joined by Angus, who's going to talk about his project, building a voice bot, and, well, there's a lot more to the project as well that we're definitely going to deep dive into. Before we get started, I had a few technical problems with microphone, and I'm just hoping, maybe if you guys could just keep us updated on the audio and how we sound. Hopefully this is still good, but definitely looking to your feedback as well, just making sure everything is a-okay. And so a real pleasure to have you, Angus. I think, obviously I'm the community manager here at Rasa. Just to give you a quick introduction, I'm mostly working on the contributor program and making sure we recognize the really awesome work by contributors and heroes and superheroes, and Angus is actually one of our Rasa heroes, and maybe you can also give us an introduction to kind of what you're working on and what you're doing, and then we can actually just get stuck into this stream today.
Sure. So thank you for having me, and I'm a big fan of Rasa, so happy to be here. And I'm a PhD student at Heriot-Watt University. I'm studying artificial intelligence, and I'm looking mainly at sort of speech processing. So our conversations, like you're nodding there, which is kind of making eye contact and smiling, all these interactions that we have with each other every day are extremely useful to sort of guide our conversations. So if I'm maybe talking to my grandma and I say something technical, and she'll maybe screw up her face, and I'll quickly tangent explain what that is and come back, so I'll guide what I'm saying without her even saying a single word. But we say yes and mm-hms, and we talk over each other and finish each other's sentences, and conversation's very messy, complex, and fun. So I'm looking at sort of those conversational phenomena, but tied to sort of voice assistants. And I don't know, we kind of clean our speech if we'll say sort of Google, set a timer for 2 minutes, and remove a lot of this sort of, my hands are dirty, could you chuck on a timer for, a couple of minutes, which we as humans understand, but voice assistants today, not so much. I've tested that example actually, so they definitely don't. There's certain user groups that can really benefit from voice assistants, so they're kind of useful. My hands are dirty, but I was at a respite care home the other day, and there was a gentleman with MS who said that he went to this care home, they had an Alexa there, and he could then open and shut his curtains. And he said that even simple things like turning off his light before he goes to bed, he doesn't have to ask someone to do it for him or get someone care to come through and help him. He gets a little bit of his independence back, which was made a world of difference to him. And there's loads of other projects, data collection with people with dementia at the moment, and being able to independently access your music is very beneficial. There's a charity called Playlist for Life, for example, that they look at how music affects mood, and it's very beneficial. And anyway, this project is for people with visual impairments, so another user group that could really benefit from being able to ask a voice assistant without having to touch buttons, or ask about the visual world around them.
That's I think the project itself, it's a really interesting and really bridges over into our mission at Rasa as well, and just generally making voice assistants, or just assistants in general, accessible to everyone, and making sure that everyone has access to this. And I think that's another really great kind of venture as well, and one of the really interesting parts and the fascinating parts that really drew me to your project as well in particular, and was and also many projects that you're working on. I know that we're going to deep dive a bit into the progress you've made so far with Aye-Saac. I think you also just generally working, as you said, on various projects that are related to this. So it's really great to kind of jump in. I think I'll ask you some questions maybe about the project itself. We'll kind of just go a little bit through the article. The article itself we posted, and a blog about this whole project we posted on our official blog on Rasa as well, so I linked that in the description of on the YouTube channel, so if you want to already have it open, check it out, you can find it there already. We're just going to go through the questions and kind of just break it down, and I really want to get some background, and I think you also want to share your motivations behind the project as well. So maybe we can actually start in, maybe we could just get maybe a quick overview of what the project actually is, and this particular one that you're focused on at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So I think 2 years ago, over the last 2 years, I've supervised about 40 MSc students, I think, almost, and about 30 of them were on this particular project. So the assistant's called Aye-Saac. And that was the first sort of group of 10 students in 2019, 2020. Over a 12-week period, they wanted to build a voice assistant to help blind and visually impaired people. And that was sort of quite a broad task, but they made a fantastic system. They came up with the name Aye-Saac. And yeah, you could do color detection, for example, and ask sort of, what is this? And yeah, I think they could also read packaging, so maybe digestives, like what is this? It could read the digestives off it. But this year I had 2 more groups of 10 students. And this particular group, the one that this blog post is about on Rasa's blog, is about sort of textual visual question answering. So that's, if you imagine that you are blind or partially sighted and you are in your kitchen and you have 3 cans, which one is your potato and leek soup? Which box of cereal is your Weetabix? Which seasoning is the turmeric? Did your food expire? Has it got, maybe you're allergic to nuts and you don't know whether this microwave meal has nuts in it. So all of these problems require text to be read from an image. So that's what this particular project was on.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it's, as we mentioned already in the previous day, I think it is a really amicable reason and motivation behind it as well. And I find that with AI and all these kind of developments, I find that aspect really exciting as well, like the kind of things that we can do to support folks that maybe are impaired in some way and that can actually boost that side of it and help them out in some form. But yeah, it's good to hear maybe also your motivation. So would you say that's your main motivation behind the project itself as well, or do you want to expand a bit more on that?
Yeah. I mean, the motivation was sort of, we started maybe thinking, oh, well, we'll help someone in their living room. But we sort of spoke to a charity called Sight Scotland, and we looked at the data as a data set called VizWiz, which contains lots of images and questions asked by visually impaired users. And we found that the kitchen was a very problematic area. So sort of we moved to the kitchen. We looked at existing systems. Currently, people have to call up a human, which raises privacy concerns if maybe the image has your address or personal information in the background, or medication. But then end-to-end systems can sort of not be as accurate. So we wanted to make a controllable system. So it's not by any means perfect, but students wanted to sort of start tackling that. And that was the main motivation, sort of try and make a system that's sort of controllable and tweakable, sort of thinks about privacy of the user, and sort of tries to help this group of people.
That's really cool. Could we maybe talk a little bit about a bit about the architecture behind it as well, and just kind of the bit more of the technical side of behind how it's actually working, and a little overview.
Yeah. So currently, instead of it being sort of end-to-end, I guess a lot of these sort of visual question answering systems are end-to-end. We have microservices. We have these components which we can sort of update, switch out. So for example, in this year, both groups updated the Rasa NLU component in Aye-Saac, and it meant they could update to sort of the latest version without having to break the rest of the system or retrain everything with a huge amount of resources. And so currently the speech comes in, we have speech recognition, which converts that to text. Then it goes through Rasa, where we can extract the NLU, sort of the user's intent. We're using the NLU section of Rasa. And the entities, maybe, I'm allergic to nuts. Can I eat this? That nuts would be extracted there through Rasa. And the image would pass through several other components. So we'd have color detection, which was already there, for example, object detection, which has been updated by a different group, maybe a future part 2, or updating the OCR to read the text in the image, and there's a spatial relations, and basically I think there may be another one, but the output of all of these happen in parallel, and then we have an interpreter which gathers all of this information. So it collects what was the user wanting, what entities were in this question, what have we figured out from the image, puts it all together, and generates a response in the end to sort of go back to the user. So it's sort of end-to-end in that we put the question, the image, and get an output, but there's sort of a lot of controllable, tweakable components in the middle. Yeah.
Oh, cool. And I think that's such a nice way to go a bit more detail into these like parts of parts of the architecture as well. So maybe you could share some insight on how how you're using the optical character recognition, a bit more about the OCR side of it.
Yeah, sure. So the OCR takes the image and then extracts any text from that image. So one problem we found initially was that people who are visually impaired often don't know how they're maybe holding a can, so it won't be directly straight for the camera. It'll be rotated slightly. So we considered maybe advising the user, maybe with some feedback, advising them to rotate, but that would be quite complex. So what we did was we used a sort of rotation, what did we call it? The skew correction sort of module there that would sort of dilate the text sort of rectangles, and then it could calculate the angle and rotate it around. And that was one I think two of the students this year spent a little bit of time on that. And we found that Tesseract OCR boosted performance by quite a large, it's in the report, I can't remember the percentage exactly, but it boosted the performance of that OCR, and we then tested that against Keras OCR, which we used in the end because it was slightly better than Tesseract. But we sort of worked on that, and that's how we get the text from the images. There's no sort of layout information yet, which is something we want to work on, but yeah, it's just sort of the text currently.
So it was just kind of like a trial and error, testing different options that are available and seeing what's working better.
I think we actually used some of this VizWiz dataset. We used sort of packaging that were taken in photographs by visually impaired people, and then we sort of evaluated a couple of the sort of main services to sort of test which one is most suitable for this case. And Keras OCR won by like 4% or something, pretty small, but it's very, very good. It's not perfect, and could definitely be improved. It's definitely one of the main problems that, as OCR gets better about packaging, that would be a great benefit. As further downstream, we have maybe we can't find the date because the OCR recognizes slashes instead of ones, or the other way around. That's a problem, for example. But
yeah, that's good. I mean, I have a few more questions for you, of course. I just wanted to point out to the chat, if you do have any questions throughout the stream as well, I'm going to jump back and we can answer them, and I think maybe we have a little time as well to answer any questions that you think of after, because I guess we will go into a bit more detail about some aspects. But I mean, you did mention, or we talked a little bit about iteration as well, and before we move on to probably more details about specific aspects of the project, I wondered, obviously it changed, your kind of architecture changed from the previous year, and so I wondered, what was it that kind of changed over time? What did you iterate most on, between that year?
Yeah, so I think for this project, compared to the original sort of last year's group where they made the foundation, we added new user intents and entities into Rasa because we actually updated to the diet model as well, and the latest version of Rasa. The sort of one of the major things was adding these extra intents. So adding allergy detection, expiry date detection, all of these things. One, if someone asks, is this safe to eat? We want to check for allergies and date. We also implemented a small user model that remembers. So if you say at one point you're allergic to nuts or you're vegetarian, then it will remember that. And if you ask, is it safe to eat? It will remember that and say, oh no, it contains sausages. It doesn't have to ask you. We also added these components, this sort of skew correction we also added all these extractors. So we called it the label extraction component, and that's the one I missed before. But yeah, this one sort of looks at the label, it looks for the ingredients, we have like a database of like common allergens, so it sort of highlights those. We looked for the expiry date. We look for things like I think we try to extract microwave meal times, which is actually particularly challenging, but we sort of had all these extractors that are specifically tasked with finding little bits of information, and then from the user's intent we can then put that together from the outputs of these extractors, and then of course we had to change the path, so depending on the user intent it takes a different path through the components. We don't need the OCR if maybe we're not asking about textual question, or the color detection is a good example. If no one's asking about what the color is, we don't need that. And then the NLG at the end, we need to output sort of the answer, and we don't have like sort of an end-to-end NLG. We wanted it to keep it quite controllable, so that was another thing we changed. Basically, we changed everything.
everything got updated. That's great. There's a lot of
that's one of the benefits. It's like it's very easy to know if something goes wrong, why it goes wrong, and go into that particular component and tweak it or update it without having to change everything. That was something we wanted, and that's I guess one of the benefits.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, we have quite a few questions about NLU in the chat, which is really, really great. But I just wanted to prerequisite those questions a little bit by just asking, you know, when it comes to utilizing Rasa as well, in particular, which aspects of Rasa? You mentioned diet, but could you expand a bit more maybe on how it's utilized in Rasa?
Yes, so we're using Rasa just for the NLU component, mainly because we tried the Rasa stories before. I think that was maybe in the first year, but we find that we couldn't get all the information we needed. We wanted to sort of really be able to tailor the output at the end. So we wanted the NLU is brilliant, and we wanted to use that. So we don't use any of the sort of NLG components of Rasa. We use the spacey medium model, sort of I've forgotten. I'm going to open up the GitHub on my other screen.
I think I also saw in your article here.
I won't have it.
Here maybe, but yeah.
There's a lot of students doing a lot of different things, and in the article you'll find details of all the students. They are really fantastic, and I didn't sort of work on every single component in depth, so but we used the diet architecture, which we found did boost performance of this I guess multitask learning approach, and I am desperately trying to find, but we used the spacey connector, the sort of language model in there. I think it's the medium one. It's in the article, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I just have it open at the moment. I have the predicted labels matrix open in it as well. But I think maybe we could just go through a couple of questions in the chat as well, because they're asking similar. So basically, are you using pre-trained models for NLU process, and also how many languages does this project support so far?
So the languages is just English, I'm afraid. We're at Heriot-Watt University, sort of in Edinburgh, and we have we have students from all around the world, but the system has been completely trained and built with English. I think that switching out the language would be possible. I've actually never thought about that. That's a very good point that I should have thought about. But currently it's been completely built in English. And we do use this sort of, the pre-trained spacey NLP language model, but then we've trained the NLU ourselves. So what we did was we looked at VizWiz, this data set of questions asked by visually impaired users. And from that, we basically looked through hundreds of examples, and we gauged the intents that we figured were the sort of most important. There was also a panel of blind computer scientists at a conference called CVPR that I watched, and they talked about some of the problems they had. And we also talked to the Sight Scotland charities. So that's how we sort of just selected the intents we wanted, and then we crowdsourced the NLU sort of data. It's not a huge amount. We just sort of asked other students in the conversational agents class, which this is part of, to come up with, if you wanted this, how would you maybe ask for it, keep it conversational, and that's how we generated our data.
Oh, great. Thanks for the question, Nikos. I hope that answered the question as well. Let us know. And so Alexandre asked, is the type policy still used in your system with augmented features such as OCR, etc.?
I don't believe so.
I don't see TED in your article, I think. I'm going to get a lot of TEP here, but I don't think...
I don't think so. I've got it here. We're using the EN Core Web Medium language model from Spacey. And then we're using the diet architecture. We did tweak it slightly, but I can't remember really. But we kept it pretty standard. Whenever we tweaked sort of off of the one that we'd grabbed from the Rasa docs or from maybe it was Vincent's algorithm whiteboard, somewhere around.
Shout out.
We found that there was a drop in performance when we changed it a lot. So there's definitely, if an expert wants to come through and improve it, there's definitely room for that, I think. But when we were just trying, we found that sort of kept on dropping performance based on our changes. So
okay. So that was good then. It was
it was
performance. That passed the test.
Yeah, the first year's good. But this, I think we had we added loads of intents, loads of entities, and still had a massive boost in performance switching to the new model. So, that was why we were brilliant. And there was lots of components. They had 12 weeks this year to do all of this. So,
wow, that's a lot that you managed to do in 12 weeks. It's actually really incredible.
I really, really commend it. This all the students were absolutely brilliant.
So response, I think it's not as he explained that he had not enough materials to build proper stories. I don't know if you have maybe feedback on it, or I don't know if it's something that maybe we could just take as feedback for next session. Maybe we have a next session coming up as well. If you want to dig in it with your team, maybe.
Yeah, we didn't really have. We have the major data sets, sort of visual question answering is you have lots of data sets, but for blind and partially sighted people, these questions, which are very particular, they're not just sort of standard visual question answering questions. We have questions and then people have annotated the answers. There's no sort of dialogue there. So we did want to add in sort of the start of multi-turns. That's why we built this user model that can sort of remember things about the user. But yeah, we didn't really have a lot of sort of dialogue data to train any stories. We just had the question answer pairs, and we wanted to sort of control it a bit more than that, basically.
Okay. And that was the reason, because you wanted to have a bit more control over the initial iterations, or?
Yeah. We wanted to know exactly what the intent was, with what confidence. We wanted all of this information, and we wanted to. The responses we wanted to be, in great control of. Basically, we'd be open to end-to-end NLG. The problem is it sort of tends to hallucinate information. And when we're talking about allergens, or people who cannot verify whether something they are allergic to, so if you say, this doesn't contain nuts, and then someone then eats that and then has an allergic reaction, it's quite safety critical. Same with maybe medication questions, text on that. So we wanted to make sure that it didn't come up with things that it saw in the data and say that. There's an example that I saw from a talk by Verena Risa recently. She said that there was someone had taken a picture of a bottle of medication, and the system had come out with saying that it was seasoning. So imagine you start putting medication on your food. It wouldn't be ideal, so that's why that was an end-to-end NLG system, which is what I mean when I say we wanted an extreme amount of control on the output. We really didn't want to come up with something
a bit open domain, I guess. Actually, that's a really great insight, so thank you actually for sharing. That's I guess the good part about it as well. It's very customizable, and you want to customize it to your particular use case. In your use case is that you have to keep it very defined because of the potential outcome of what could happen or repercussions. So yeah,
I guess some questions are fine, but if we wanted to add a rule that if the system is answering a question about medication, we wanted to be more confident before it sort of gives an answer. That would be something that we'd want to do, for example.
Cool. And I have another question in the chat. So do you support follow-up questions, or is the next question treated as a new one?
Yeah. So there's two groups, and the other group had also took some steps in a slightly different method. But this group, in both groups, we wanted to make steps towards multi-turn. The reason for that is when you're using a human-in-the-loop system as a visually impaired person, that is one of the major benefits, is you can have follow-up questions and a bit of a dialogue. So that was something we wanted to do, so that's why we made this user model that remembered if you were a vegetarian, remembered what you were allergic to, remembered something else. And we, probably your name, I believe, And we also considered, we didn't implement this due to just time, but a fridge model would also be kind of an interesting thing to implement. You know, if you all, what do I need to make this recipe? And it goes, oh, you need 6 eggs, but you only have 4, that would maybe, or on the expiry date, you could say, oh, this is expired, but you have a spare one in the fridge, maybe, I don't know, something like that. But currently it was just this user model, and that's sort of the first steps toward multi-turn, but yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I hope that answers the question, Michael. I don't know if you have follow-up questions to that, but thank you for your question. Yeah, I guess I had another question for you as well, which I wrote down. I think, well, we kind of broke down a little bit more about, I was going to scroll back up for the for the audience so we can go back to like the component of things that are happening in the dialog manager. Yeah, I think one of the things you mentioned that you added as well is the spatial detection, and also that it's possibly something that you want to work further on. Could you maybe share some insight on that as well? And how it's working? Maybe a bit more about that too.
Yeah, no, the spatial detection was the other group's sort of one of their main components. The reason why it's sort of interesting here is that spatial detection model is very good at describing the relations between different objects, but if you asked where are the Cheerios, it wouldn't know, because that group didn't implement the sort of textual stuff. They were working in parallel. So one thing we're wanting to do is combine these things, so you can start using the spatial relation component of the other group with the textual implementation, I guess, of this group. So asking where are the Cheerios, always says next to microwave, because it knows Cheerios not from object detection, but from the OCR, instead. So yeah, that was the main thing that I guess in this project that we would want to do in the future with the spatial relations and this sort of textual visual question answering.
Okay, and is that the main thing that you want to work further on, like into the future with the project, or is there other aspects that you want to like iterate on a bit more, or things that you might want to add, or some maybe like dreams of adding? Or maybe we could talk about that after, the dreams.
So many. Yeah, I guess as this was built in relatively short time frames, basically 24 weeks, just over 2 years. There are so many things we'd like to implement. Currently, we have implemented. It knows that sausages are meat. So if you say you're a vegetarian and you hold up a can of soup and it sees sausages, it can tell you that that's not suitable for you. However, the other group had a problem where they were saying, is this a fruit? And it was a picture of an apple. And the object detection was saying no, because it doesn't know that apples are fruit. It's like, no, this is an apple, not a fruit. So that's something, this knowledge base of maybe an ontology of what things are would be extremely useful to implement. The OCR is, I would say, the main problem in this particular project was the OCR. Whenever things were going wrong, it tended to be the OCR had misread the label completely. And that's just because some food packages are extremely packed full of information. There's no sort of set layout. And one student had this idea, and I think this would be the ultimate dream, would be that there should be some sort of like accessibility QR code or something like that on a packaging. So not just for sort of visually impaired people, but you have a system where you can put it to the camera and it would know the exact expiry date, exactly what ingredients, exactly how long you should cook that, what temperature. That would be kind of useful and save a lot of this work, sort of trying to extract the exact correct information from packaging, which is rotated slightly in different colors and formats. And for example, the expiry date format, we looked at the most common ones in the UK. There's like 6 or something like that, and that was just the UK. Other countries have their own formats that tend to be common. So even just getting expiry date, which seems like a really trivial task, is fun. sort of all of these things could definitely be improved. There's and then moving into multi-turn and I don't know.
That's really interesting. I had like one little thought about it. Well, what about with the barcode? Because I mean, I think it's a really good idea with the QR code, and I think like just maybe having a bit more detail, like you said, about expiry date and things like that. Maybe that can be more easily added to a QR code. But for example, I have Fitbit right now. I've just got into my Fitbit, and when I put in my barcode for like the certain food I'm eating or something, it will pull up all the nutritional stuff, and it will like, I guess there's a knowledge base already of like nutrition, but maybe not so much about like the other aspects that are like, it doesn't say if it's meat or not or something like that. So, but I think like having a knowledge base in general would be really useful, I guess, with combination with codes or some sort of code, and I think that could help.
I did not know. That's very interesting. I know that like if I get, I don't know, I've got Milky Bar buttons here, right? So if I get them from two different shops, the barcode's exactly the same. So I knew that they were sort of like had some sort of central barcode thing. I did not know they had the nutritional information. They definitely wouldn't have the expiry date, just because if I buy Milky Bar buttons in a year, they're going to be the same barcode. But that's very interesting to know. I actually did not know that nutritional information was stored with the barcode.
I didn't know either. I think it's just like I think it's a knowledge base that someone built on top of it. But anyway, going off track into food barcodes. I don't want to.
Something like that would be fantastic. Yes, that would save. That's very good to know. Thank you.
Cool. So Alexandria also had another question. Just wondering, can you elaborate on the interpreter and how do you merge this information?
Yeah. So it's actually not that complicated. Maybe one of my students that built it would disagree, but we use RabbitMQ to sort of handle the messages between all the components, and it sort of checks to make sure that everything is done and complete before moving on, sort of to generate response. And the interpreter, what's a good example? I'm going to use what color is this intent, just because it's sort of fairly simple and only uses like really one component. The interpreter would know that intent fairly quickly. And earlier on, we have this sort of manager bit, which would choose the path, and it would only fire the color detection. And then the interpreter would then go, right, well, what color is that? It gets the information from the... No, it doesn't, sorry, it fires the object detection as well. If you said what colour is the elephant, I'm going to use an elephant, it would get the bounding box for the elephant, get the colour of the centre of that bounding box, and then it would give that information. So the interpreter would get the intent, the entity, the object detection. It would match it, sort of match which entity was asked for, which one's the bounding box in the image, and then the colour detection for the centre of that bounding box. So that's sort of what the interpreter does, sort of, I guess, interprets or like sort of puts together the pieces of all the outputs of the different components, and then the NLG can go, okay, I need to reply, I know the intent, therefore I know I'm reporting a color, and it will say something like, the color is, and the interpreter will have handed it the color. So yeah, I hope that made sense. But essentially the interpreter has a different set of things it does depending on the intent output by Rasa.
So does it, sorry, my own question, so does it like combine all of this information together to make an accurate
Yeah. So the color detection model will output colors in like across that image. The object detection will output all the objects, but from Rasa we know that they're looking for the color, so that if you're looking at the color detection output, it knows that it's an elephant. So it just looks at the elephant, the object detection, it ignores all the rest of it, and then it looks for the colour in the centre of that bounding box that's output from the object detection. So it sort of disregards, throws away the stuff that it doesn't need, that was output by the components, and then it passes on that piece of information to the NLG that sort of makes it into a natural language response rather than just grey. It will say something like a bit nicer.
It'll be more friendly with us. Cool. I hope that answers your question, Alexandra, as well. Nice. So, I mean, we kind of went through quite a few questions as well. Chat, if you do have a few more, just let us know. I guess my questions as well is just would just be like, what's kind of next on the agenda? I know we spoke a bit more about the things in V1, but is there, do you have any other dreams for the project, or anything else maybe? Maybe we could, I guess we could close the wrap up on this kind of topic as well.
Yeah, so I guess my core PhD is actually the speech processing from groups of users such as people with dementia. So, but I'm working on sort of understanding what people are saying as they see each word. So if I say, yesterday I ate a banana, and you know that yesterday I ate a banana with something, you don't need me to say the last word before you understand everything I say. But that's sort of how current voice systems work. So we're wanting to output as words are said. When I say the word grapes to finish that sentence, it would sort of update this understanding. And we would like to, I ultimately would like to add the visual side of things to that as well. So if I say, oh, John likes that, and I point at the TV, then the object detection would see a point to an object, the TV. At the same time, there's an anaphoric expression detected in my sort of understanding module, and then it would be, okay, we know that John likes the TV. So that's my ultimate PhD goal. In terms of Aye-Saac, we are hoping to sort of get more students on this. I think I'm getting to the end of my PhD, sadly, so I'm not sure. But there's many students that are now PhD students who can take over supervisory roles. But ultimately, the ultimate goal would be to, someone else has a cool idea, they come in and they build their own component. Maybe they're interested in CDs and they want to be able to recognize albums from album covers. That is someone talked about that once, and that would definitely be possible. So I guess that's the ultimate goal. Some sort of open source project people can go in, not as big as Rasa, and sort of ask the students what they did and for more documentation. But yeah, that would be the ultimate goal.
Oh, that's amazing. Actually, I was going to ask, but it's also kind of putting you on the spot. But I think, I wanted to ask about the open source aspect as well. If you would, eventually, obviously you're working very hard on it, and there's a lot to take care of, and you're also a big team. So I guess we'll probably also quickly talk about that. But I think the fact that you want to make it open source is just like one of the best parts as well, that people can also get involved, and it would be interesting maybe to see what other people could bring to the project and what like their thoughts are, and what they could bring to it. So yes, open source for the win.
I'm sure there are people that are very, very much more Rasa experts than any team or myself, and could go in there and do something that improves the performance, or even adding whole components. The code is available. It's not well documented is my caveat there, but the code is available, so technically it's kind of open source. But
right. I'm just gonna open it actually. Over at Aye-Saac, right? That's what you have open source so far on GitHub.
Yeah. And both groups have put their stuff in there, so everything is there together. It's just, and it does still work. Some students made sure that it still works. They sort of combined new intents from both groups. But yeah, it's just one of those things with so many components and so many things moving about. It's fun to get your head around initially. I found this year, especially with the newer students, I had underestimated that part. But once people get up and running, know which component they're working on, know to ignore everything else, it's okay.
Great. Well, I don't want to put pressure on you, or more pressure, because obviously you have a lot to do. But yeah, I guess I just have a quick question about it. Is it the updated version on GitHub, or is it still like the original version that you worked on so far?
I believe that. Yeah, I think it's the one with both student groups.
Okay.
Sort of hard to.
There was a commit also like 10 days ago, so probably it's.
Oh, that was me just updating, because the first group of students didn't get like a paper, so I wanted to make sure to add their names, and that was just me adding that. But yeah, the code is all there. Definitely the documentation is not ideal, but yeah.
Yeah, like you said, you have many things going on, but the code is there, and the folks that want to maybe give it a shot already before maybe later adding some maybe they can help you. That's the great thing about open source. If anyone wants to help Angus with his documentation and Aye-Saac, then this is a call to everyone. Great. I don't know, maybe in the chat just before, I guess we will start to wrap up a little bit, but before that, I just wanted to ask maybe in chat if there's any last questions before we go, and in the meantime, maybe we can, you have maybe a shout out to your team, and maybe whatever words you want to mention about the kind of things they worked on, and yeah.
Yeah, so this particular project, like this one that the blog came out about sort of textual visual question answering, we did sort of release a paper. It's actually being presented by Elisa, the first author on the paper, on the 18th. So yeah, it's quite exciting. That is it's a sort of conference, but the paper's coming out then too, and that'll be the sort of blog post is like more casually written version of that paper, I would say. But yeah, the team was sort of Elisa Ramel-Brick, Vanessa Caballero Alonso, Connor O'Brien, Sharon Tong, Emilie Tavernier, Amit Parekh, myself, and Oliver Lemon. So yeah, that was the sort of the students, myself, and then Oliver is the head of my department who supervised me. But yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's nice to hear. To get a shout out for the team as well. Like obviously, it's quite a big feat to do, and it's a lot of folks working on that. So
and their LinkedIn's are sort of linked in the blog. So yeah, go and add them and check out their next work and the things they're going to be up to.
Yeah, check it out. Check it out. I did link everything in the description. I think I linked all of their LinkedIn's as well. If for anyone in GitHub as well. I just shared on the stream so you can see all of their socials and things are on there. Cool. Then I think I don't think we have more questions so far, but I think maybe for folks that are watching, maybe you'd be happy in case you want to reach out about the project, or if you have some further questions, maybe you could also write maybe to us on the forum, on the Rasa forum, and I could maybe kind of connect you as well on the forum to answer those questions. So yeah, but would you be that?
If people chatting, it's fine by me. I'll enjoy a good discussion, and I hope I answered the questions okay for you all.
Alexander gave you a thumbs up, so I think it's really good. Great. Well, thanks so much for joining, and it was really, really great talking to you. I think in general, it's really nice to jump in and check in what you're doing on your project, and also just like for the showcase in general, I really want to find a way to expand on really awesome projects that happen in the community, and for others to also understand a bit more about like the challenges like you mentioned, and the things that you like actually dream of doing, and what's really possible like with Rasa, and also or utilizing Rasa as well. So yes, thank you so much for going into detail about some of the things. I learned a lot actually today about it, so it was really great to hear it. And I think so for folks as well, if you want to read the first article or the blog post, as I mentioned, it's in the description, but maybe you wanted to also share a teaser, I think, for like what's coming up in terms of content for around this project.
And I would also like to thank Rasa for sort of supporting the students during the process. They learned a lot, and they all loved Rasa. It's sort of so easy to use and so brilliant, and all the textual side of things were all handled by Rasa. But the other group who also used Rasa, the NLU, they worked on sort of spatial relations. So if you ask a current sort of competition-winning visual question answering system, or where's the fork, and you give it a picture of the kitchen with a fork in it, it will say in the kitchen. So really, really useful. If you're visually impaired, that's going to be fantastic. You're going to know exactly where it is. The students here, they sort of looked at maybe anchor objects. So for a similar reason why we didn't use the living room in the end, there are objects that don't move, like sinks and ovens and stuff like that, and tables, that people with visual impairments know where they are in their own home. So they have a mental map of all these stationary objects. It's the ones that move that are the problem. So the other group of students looked at, if you ask where's the fork, it doesn't answer it's next to the spoon, because then you're going to ask where the spoon is. It will say, oh, it's just to the right of the sink and to the left of the microwave, for example. Or it uses hands, or it uses absolute position in the sort of last resort. But that's essentially the idea, to give more usable explanations of where something is in the kitchen.
Oh, that's so great. I always feel like really hopeful as well that people are working on things like this. I think this is just such a nice inspirational thing you're working on and project. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing about it today, Angus. It was really, really great chatting with you, and maybe then we can revisit this when you also publish your next articles and things that you're planning.
Yeah.
We could do another check-in and see how things are going.
That'd be fun, and thank you everyone for the questions, and thank you very much for setting all this up. I know it was a lot of work.
It's always a pleasure. I'm always very happy to do so. And it's also really fun to stream again. So I guess just wanted to say then thanks everyone for watching, if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out on the forum. We want to do these showcases more regularly in future. I think we do them every few weeks at the moment, but I will definitely look to up the frequency when we can, and just generally share updates from the community side and things that we're working on. So great. Thanks, Angus, and then I guess I wish everyone a great rest of your week, and I hope to see you in the next one.
Thank you.
Ciao, everyone.